Okay, hello. So, welcome to a very casual Tuesday night chat. We're going to be talking about really, I think, leaving atheism, progressivism, and a lot of the intellectual trends that have gone on basically since 2007. So, we have a bunch of people on. I'm going to try to cycle it, bring the people in as the chat goes on. I really don't want to have to moderate this too hard, actually, at all. I guess we have Zimmy, who's perhaps going to be a new YouTuber. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Zimmy. I'm just going to say I'm from the East Coast. I guess first YouTube experience was last night with Mouthy Buddha, who, if you are not familiar with his content, he's amazing, and just a genuinely nice guy as well. But during the stream, we got into a lot of different topics, and they asked, some of the people were asking if I should start my own channel, and John suggested that there's not enough girls in the kind of political skeptic community, so figured why not. My first video this morning this afternoon took me about 8 hours to figure out all of it. But as far as religion goes, I was born and raised kind of, like I said in the stream, just nominally atheist. Kind of, we kind of believed in God, but it was never anything we talked about. I personally just didn't believe. Started coming around, started with just kind of non-denominational Protestant, a little more evangelical, a more fundamentalist. I didn't believe in evolution there for a little while. Now I consider myself extremely traditional Catholic. So yeah, that's my quick little story.
Awesome. I think there was a number of really interesting conversations that you had with Mouthy Buddha. I can't get used to saying that name. Does he just go by Buddha? Can I just say that?
I
feel like I'm about to smack him. Mouthy Buddha, bad.
MB is a good thing.
It feels like I'm saying Milton Bradley, like the board game manufacturer.
John is his first name. I don't think he's ever really taken much effort to hide that. Can't really dox anybody on the name John. I mean, come on. But
everyone who calls me Dave, if they're not calling me distributist, then I don't consider myself to be doxed. But okay, Before we get into that, let's keep on going to the other people. Sinclair.
Yes. Hello. I am a layman when it comes to philosophy. I've just begun learning different philosophical topics, and I'm trying to be a sort of autodidact when it comes to it. And I'm sorry, I'm very bad off the cuff, but I do a YouTube channel where I try to explain philosophical subjects from a layman to layman. So
nice.
That sounds like something you might be interested in. You could take a look at that. I also do some video games, but not really that often. And I also love historical subjects. But basically, when it comes to religion, I am non-religious, and I am skeptical when it comes to the existence or non-existence of God. Not skeptical in the sense that I doubt the existence of God, but skeptical in the sense that I don't think that knowledge like existence or non-existence of God is possible for humans.
Well, that's interesting. Although I think tonight we're just sort of talking about personal journeys.
Mm-hmm.
We might have a different stream later that will discuss sort of the philosophy of things or whatnot.
Okay.
Whoa, someone just entered and left. I made that could have been another Benedict who has a slot.
As far as politics goes, I used to be a progressive. I used to be a standard progressive, not so much in the social aspect, but more in the economic aspect. So I was a social democrat who was relatively liberal or slightly libertarian, you might say, when it comes to social issues. I'm still slightly libertarian, but I'm no longer economically left-wing. I would consider myself center-right. And I love the pursuit of philosophical subjects a lot more than I once did. But in my daily life, I would say I follow a more egoistic perspective, an egoistic standpoint. So that's a little bit about me.
Cool. Josh?
I am a bad YouTuber. I make bad YouTube videos. Protestant mostly. I grew up in like a somebody's got like a wind tunnel going on in the stream. Not sure who. I grew up
Don't worry about it. Just keep on going.
A bunch of different churches. None of them are perfect. I like philosophy and history, and I also like technology. I don't really. I'm bad at intros. I'm sorry. I'll stop talking.
Okay, yeah. Let's just get it done quickly. So anyone else? Are you another Benedict?
Yeah, that's me. Can everybody hear me okay?
Awesome. So I think we have another Roman Catholic in addition to me and Zimmy, right?
Yeah, Latin Rite Catholic, yes.
No way.
Ooh.
Really? FSSP?
No, Latin Rite.
Not that Latin. Come on.
No, not. Oh, sorry. I thought you meant, for some reason, I thought you meant Latin Mass.
Yeah, Roman Catholic is actually an anti-Catholic epithet, so I don't embrace that terminology. So
I never use Latin Rite to describe myself. I use Greek Rite to describe people who aren't Latin Rite.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the problems with being a Catholic in America is that you just assume that it's Roman Catholic this and Roman Catholic that, and having hung out with a lot of Eastern Rite Catholics, I became aware of the difference. And having studied enough history to know that Catholics got called Romanists and Papists for the better part of American history, and that wasn't a compliment. So,
well, I think we'll discuss that. But before, I just want to bring in the last introduction, Anarcho.
Thanks. I guess I'll make this quick. My first, thoughts on religion, because I was raised mixed faith. I was raised without religion. And so my first beliefs regarding that were that of a militant anti-theist between the age of, I think I would say, starting around 10, ending around 14. So once I got past that phase, I generally adopted more passive anti-theism. But I think because anti-theism wasn't really providing enough answers to a lot of questions I had, I started looking for another ideology. So I fell into libertarianism with Ron Paul movement in 2012, back when I was a senior in high school around that time. But then I later fell out of that movement for the exact same reason I fell out of anti-theism, because it just wasn't providing enough answers to things. And so after that, I started looking for another movement in which I came across some alt-right articles, and I started looking into alt-right stuff for a while, not for the racial aspect. I never really cared about that at all. I just liked the traditionalist aspect and a lot of the more, as it says, alternative right-wing ideologies. And that's how I came across traditionalist ideas, and I kind of grew out of that sort of basic libertarian atheism, and now I have a much greater appreciation for religion and theism in modern society.
Sure. I was actually originally, when I conceptualized this stream, I was trying to look for people who were specifically converts away from new atheism, as I myself was. Very briefly was drawn into the new atheist thing, and I think a few people here are converts to Catholicism from new atheism. Zimmy, I think you had like a story about that. I heard part of it last night.
Yeah, I wouldn't even go as far to say I was one of the new atheists. I actually, the new atheists are a little more smart than I was, actually. Actually, a lot. Let's talk about Richard Dawkins. Let's be real.
It's hard to imagine.
Yeah, I really was just, I wasn't Catholic because I wasn't atheist because I just thought about it too much and just, decided after a long decision that atheism was for me. It was basically just, I never really had a reason for it, which is actually what I hear from a lot of atheists that I know now, is I just never really had a reason for it. I'm a pretty good person. I make up my own decision about what's right and what's wrong, and That's fine until you're a hormonal teenager or older, and you realize your morals are starting to get you into a lot of trouble. And it can be in small ways, in ways that people can't really see, in terms of what do you do when everyone's not looking, to big ways, to getting caught in lies and being noticeably slothful. And those are just, those are more of the mild sort. There's definitely worse things that I did, but you just start to realize that if you keep going down this path, something needed to change. So I didn't know that I was looking for religion, but I did start.
Did you start as a teenager?
I was getting into a lot of trouble around 17, 18. My parents were going through a lot of problems, and I just started rebelling and just being a horrible person. And around that time, I met. I had already met my future husband when I was around 12. Mm-hmm. I moved around a lot, and we separated. Kids moved away from each other. No, not a huge deal, but we kept in contact a little bit. Really started talking more when I became 17, 18. And so right around that time, when I was getting to the point of getting harder to turn back to being a decent human being, when I was really starting to get into the trouble, and just about one bad decision away from irreparably damaging my reputation, I decided, all right, that's it. This town isn't for me. I'm moving to be with my soon-to-be fiance, soon-to-be husband, and my boyfriend at the time. And we just left. And he was always raised kind of non-denominational Protestant by his single mother. And she was very, I was talking a little bit about her last night, but she was one of the main first positive Christian influences that I ever had in my life. And she used to tell me all the time that, I've known her since I was 12, but I didn't really have that close a relationship until I moved up with her. But she said, I've been praying for you since you were 5 years old. And I'm like, what? Like, at first, that just seems so silly to me. You've only known me for, a fraction of that time. And she said, no, I've been praying for my son's wife ever since then. And I never really took it seriously until we were preparing to get married. And I just saw that there were so many things that I could have done that would have led me away from getting married to this amazing man. And while he doesn't exactly identify as Christian now, I can definitely see in his character a Christian upbringing. And I joke all the time with my priest that, like, thank God for the church, because I would be such a just pathetic human being. But you know what? He might actually get by all right without the church. Like, he's a pretty decent man just by default. And I swear if he ever does become Catholic, like, there's no doubt who the saint is going to be in the two of us. But he, hopefully I can get in just because I was married to him, like Saint Teresa's parents, like, let's get a two-for deal in there.
There is a very oft ignored element to Catholicism that seems to imply that that you can sort of congenitally catch sainthood.
No,
Catholics do love their deals, don't they?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
no.
we're kind of like we're kind of like the JQ that way. No.
Oh gosh, no.
No, we're not going into that.
That's what this stream is about, right?
Yeah, no, we're not touching that. We're
another day.
Well, and that was actually one of the original topics on the Mouthy Buddha stream, but I have no intention of touching that with a 10.
I need a break for a few days. But anyway, so that got me to be Protestant. I was Protestant for quite a while. I'm not sure if you're a fan of is it called Way of the Master? I don't think it's called that. Who was that guy, the curly-haired guy who does this evangelization training thing? And he used to be an 80s.
You've just described 20 Protestants in my mind.
Yeah.
Oh, right. He used to be an 80s teen heartthrob on some show, Growing Pains, I think. And
Kirk Cameron.
Kirk Cameron. Right. Well, he has this this evangelical training. And I was just obsessed and teaching you how to identify the faith and his whole street ministry. And I thought that was really cool. I tried to apply it to, I was like maybe a Christian. I'm still unbaptized until I was Catholic, actually. But I was just on fire, and everything I could get my hands on, I would read. And but then I kind of hit this wall where I just wasn't interested anymore. And I just, like some obsessions, they kind of fizzle out, because it wasn't a thoroughly genuine love for the faith. It was, oh, this is fun. This is a new identity to have. I'm in a new town, a new job, and new family around me, really. And it was something new to add to my identity. And I threw in some Fox News for good measure. And it was a whole new person. And my husband and I, we just kind of molded together. Our identities changed. We grew up a lot. Both of us kind of became this more libertarian, non-denominational kind of, Christian thing. And then we got married with a ceremony that was vaguely religious, but it kind of always bothered me. I wanted a little more. I wanted a real church. I wanted a real pastor. I wanted to be baptized before I was married, but I actually never did. But I waited, because I just kind of pushed it off. And my husband really, at this time, we had both started college together, and he was kind of coming to terms with his own upbringing and his own faith, and he never really had a chance to really honestly question it. So he was kind of going one way, and I was going the other. But then I met a young woman who was a graduate of a local Catholic university, like not like Loyola Catholic, like super Catholic, like some of the best, like the Scott Hahns and some of the best theologians ever.
Like Francisville, the Steubenville Catholic.
Yeah, it would be considered like the Franciscan of my state, basically. Okay. And not to give too much away, but yeah, and she was very well versed. She was just a beautiful person. She was very sweet. Her fiance, who she was telling me about, and I was getting to know a little bit. She was just telling me about how their journey of discerning their vocations and how beautiful that was. And at the time, I was actually pretty anti-Catholic, and I started asking her questions. And I had been around some nominally Catholic people. I always had a really negative opinion, and being really, really conservative and right-wing at this point, I saw most Catholics to be way too liberal. And most of them were pro-gay marriage. Most of them were anti-gun. Most of them were pro-abortion, contraception, all of the things that I just it just irked me the wrong way. And I started talking to her, and she was the first traditional Catholic I had really ever met, especially one who was about my age and just made the faith in so many ways attractive. Mm-hmm. And
the church that is true. The Catholic Church does have a tendency to fly with the cultural tide.
Yeah, it depends on there's certain groups, like Jesuits have a bad reputation, but there's others who, I definitely agree. And I unfortunately think that's our main face.
It's funny because the Jesuits used to be such a stalwart order. They kind of fell to the times, but I'm also noticing some common elements between your experience and mine. I think was it Pope John Paul II used to say that the only true methods of conversion to the church, aside from basically direct intervention of the Holy Spirit, and in some sense all conversions are interventions by the Holy Spirit, but the only exception to that, the most powerful evangelization are the acts of the great saints and the works of great Catholic art that have been left behind in previous generations.
Right.
And I'm hearing very similar things here, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And she just, not only was it just her taking me under her wing, and I mean, of course she wanted to have, that one Catholic who she said, I brought her in. Of course, there's probably a little bit of that, because I feel that sometimes, but I think she genuinely wanted me to understand the faith for my own benefit.
Yeah, and of course, us Catholics, we're going behind and we're high-fiving each other for sheep-stealing Protestants.
Yeah, exactly.
You get 5 purgatorial points for sheep-stealing a Protestant.
Exactly. Giving somebody a rosary.
Forgive my blasphemy, people in the chat who are pious.
So I just started knocking off things on my list. Like, what do you mean you don't worship Mary? The typical things. It's like, what do you mean you don't worship the saints? Are you really saying that the Pope is basically just Jesus on earth and he's infallible? And as those things were knocked out, I really didn't have much. But ironically, one of the very first things I accepted was the idea of being against contraception. And which is what I've heard from everyone. I mean, you look at the statistics, most Catholics are on birth control and think that's just whatever, take it or leave it. Don't need it. But that was
It's
the
always
first
hard to
one.
quantify, right? Because the questions they ask, these
Oh,
posts, have you
yeah.
ever used birth control? Is the question they
I
ask.
know, right? Exactly.
And
So
they're asking with the anticipation of an answer like 88 to 90%.
right,
Yes.
and I've heard from my friends that those stats are way off, and I sure as hell hope they do, but they are. But yeah, so contraception was one of the very first things I accepted, and it took me a while to really get fully on the NFP train. But it took a lot. It was very difficult. I'm not gonna lie, very emotionally difficult, especially not be having a Catholic husband. It was a difficult thing, and luckily through all of that pain, I started to see how important it really was, and yeah, so NFP was really one of those things that really clicked first. And I'm like, you know what? I might not understand the whole Marian theology yet, but there is something to be said for the idea of making sex more natural and more in rhythm with the human body and with the way that we are created. And that just resonated with me, and it stuck with me. And when I started seeing all of these things that the Catholic Church says, that I was like, that's odd. But you know what? They're right about NFP. They're right about contraception. I'm going to keep reading and give them the benefit of the doubt. And that's 4 years later, I worked for the church. So
it's weird because a lot of women say that, and I can't even conceptualize. For me, that was the last thing I could possibly, accept. I'm like, really? I get abortion, but NFP. But no, I hear that a lot. But it seems you're also interested, sort of in current events too, right? I mean, first of all, I should ask: other people have stories of conversion? What's their? I mean, I know Anarcho, you gave a little bit of yours, and another Benedict. Do you have a conversion story?
Yeah, I sort of do. My name's Craig, by the way. Another Benedict is
Craig.
the website or the blog that I attempt to maintain in my spare time. But yeah, I came into the church as a 21-year-old college student in 1996. I was not too far from where you are, Data Distributist, down in Olympia, Washington.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, I was. I think you and I had an exchange about this. Yeah, I was a student at Evergreen, of all places.
Oh dear Lord. God bless you, sir. God bless you.
Aggressively secular, liberal, Marxist institution in the country, I think. It still is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my freshman year, I kind of came in there sort of an apolitical sort of guy, just looking for, a sort of a different educational path. Because Evergreen has no traditional classrooms or grades, and you write your own evaluations, and it's all very 1960s and hippie and alternative. But
Santa Cruz didn't stop being Santa Cruz in the 70s.
Yeah, no, well, it's a little piece of that migrated up to Olympia. But anyway, I between the beginning of my freshman year and the end of my sophomore year, I had gone from sort of agnosticism to accepting Christ and on my way into the RCIA and into the Catholic Church in the course of about 2 years. And the first step in that was becoming sort of a card-carrying traditionalist, reading a lot of conservative philosophy, Russell Kirk in particular. And Russell Kirk pointed me to G.K. Chesterton. And Kirk pointed me in the direction of a lot of different Catholics that were, I was reading them primarily for political science and history. And it just so happened that all of these people that I was really into, they turned out to be Catholic. And I thought, that's a curious thing going on there. And I also was dating a girl at the time who was a Christian, and in the name of getting to know her better, I started going to the on-campus fellowships and got
that's how we do
exposure. Yeah, no, that's there's a couple of those stories going back into high school too, but that's for less germane to the topic. But anyway, so I'm dating this girl. Catholicism is coming up in spades on the radar screen, and I kind of just get to this point where I knew I was moving closer to Christ, and I knew I was moving closer to the church. I wanted to be Catholic before I was even a Christian, and kind of accepted Christ evangelical style. And I said, well, I've got the summer to work out the Reformation, and did a lot of
Reformation summer.
That's exactly what it was. I had, I had a minor summer job, and I had stacks of Luther and Calvin and comparative theology and all of this stuff. And at the end of the summer, I was like, and being a traditionalist, I looked at the whole situation from the point of view of tradition and said, I cannot stand in the tradition of Luther or Calvin or any of these other splinters that blew up in 1517. And so that was really it. I needed a tradition I could stand in, and the Catholic Church, and to some extent the Orthodox Church, were the only ones running. I mean, I wasn't going to go to a church that was founded on a fornicator and an adulterer. That just made no sense. So
I said the exact same thing.
Harsh.
So I mean that eliminates
Anglicanism.
Yeah, no, I've got some good friends there in Seattle that are Anglican. They would hate me for saying, or they would roll their eyes and go, "Okay, Craig." But anyway, so that was really it. It was I was received into the church, and it just so happened that where I was received into the church at Sacred Heart Parish in Lacey, Washington, was right around the corner from St. Martin's Abbey, Benedictine Abbey, and so. Being a college student, I was like, well, I need some Catholic people to hang out with. I mean, I didn't really want to stay at Evergreen, so ended up hanging out pretty heavily at the monastery. And as a new Catholic, you think, okay, I'll go to Mass, I'll pray the Rosary, and I was like, no, I'm going to go to morning prayer, noon prayer, and evening prayer, and hang out with the monks. And
Sweet.
So it was kind of a crazy first year as a Catholic, but I was just ensconced in Benedictine monasticism, and for a good.
That's hardcore.
Oh, it's beautiful though.
And the Benedictines aren't even the hardcore ones. I mean, you look at the Trappists or the Carthusians; they're the hardcore ones. The Benedictines are pretty accessible and pretty sort of. I hesitate to say middle of the road. It's still a serious spirituality, but.
All order spiritualities are serious in their primal form. Jesuit spirituality is serious in its primal form. It's just been diluted, very diluted, right?
Yeah, I mean, in looking at I'm less familiar with the Jesuits, but when you look at the you look at the broad panorama of Benedictines or orders that follow the rule of Saint Benedict. There's a lot going on out there, and there's a lot of really really holy people that are doing some amazing things out there. So
it's like every time you come across people, as a Catholic, you sort of live for those times that you come across people where you're like, that is a living saint.
Right.
Yeah.
And, it's really a truly amazing experience.
Well, and
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. No, when I was hanging out at St. Martin's, that was one of the insights that I had. Is that I hadn't really known any Catholics before I came into the church too much, and I was watching these monks, and I mean, they were very down to earth, very real people. But I was like, these are whole people in the sense that they have a good sense of humor. They're they don't seem to have any neuroses or hang-ups or. I was like, these are just holy people in the sense of there being sort of a whole person. And so that kind of an introduction to sanctity and to holiness was, I think, really key for my understanding of what this whole sanctification thing was all about, is that it wasn't some Gnostic kind of pie in the sky, spirit good, body bad kind of situation. It was a very sort of holistic and kind of integrated sort of thing. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Before we go on to, I know I'm privileging people with sort of the conversion story, but that was sort of the first question. We'll go on to more general topics where there'll probably be more of a back and forth. But was there anyone else who wanted to just relate? Like, did you walk away from atheism or progressivism recently, or
I could talk about walking away from progressivism if you'd like.
oh, that'd be great. Actually, it'll be a different take, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, somebody who's an atheist but also right wing.
Yeah, interesting.
Or rather center right. I was raised Catholic. I was raised in a relatively moderate Catholic community in Ohio. I'm around the age of 14 or 15. I began to become interested in people like Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart, and I became more influenced by them because I've always loved comedy. And I thought that they were very funny men. And my opinions about oh, hi Jason in the chat. My opinions about human society and politics and economy kind of stem from that Jon Stewart sort of group of people. And when I was a teenager, that's where I came from, and that's where my first ideas came from, or derived from. I actually really like being the least educated person in a room. I respect that. I'm really
It's better than being the smartest person in a room. You learn nothing.
Yeah. Around the age of 16 or 17, I kind of fell away from being a believer into being more of an agnostic, and I think I'm partially to blame for that, and not just people, and not just what I watched on TV, because I've always been interested in history, and I was always very interested in biblical history and what you might call extra biblical history. So fictions that were presented as nonfiction were very interesting to me. Things that I didn't realize were fiction. So I was always interested in things like the Knights Templar. It's where the name St. Clair comes from, and the idea of the bloodline of Jesus Christ. I was
where does the St. Clair come from? I thought it was a reference to, the companion of St. Francis.
No.
Well, please elaborate. I want to hear this.
Well, yeah, and I was very interested in the historical writings of people like David Rolls and Charles N. Pope, which a couple of lunatics who tried to rewrite ancient history to be more consistent with the Old Testament, specifically Egyptian history. And by around the age of 18, I was introduced to the very funny and entertaining lunatic George Carlin. And I was very influenced by for a while. And that's where I kind of started becoming an anti-theist around the age of 18, and a very vehement anti-theist. And I first started listening to people like Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins. And Hitchens I loved very much for a long time. And
he had a razor wit, that man. I'll say that.
Yes, he was very easy. Young people are very easily convinced by people like that. People who are very intelligent and they know how to make a moral argument. They know how to convince a crowd. And how you convince a crowd is moral grandstanding, and he did a lot of that. That's what he's.
Christopher Hitchens is pretty much right about everything except for Christianity. I'm sorry.
And the Iraq War, right?
Oh, we're not familiar, but I'll trust you.
So I was a social democrat as a young adult, and I guess the way you could describe me is sort of like do you know who? Have you ever seen Secular Talk? Do you know who Kyle Kalinske is?
Oh yeah.
I was pretty much in the exact same place at the age of 19, around 2014, 2015, as he is now. And I did begin my YouTube channel with that in mind, with the kind of social democratic, not exactly progressive, but somewhat progressive, sympathetic to the progressive movement attitude. I was interested in the economic aspect. I thought that social democracy, I thought that increase in taxes and government spending were a good idea. I don't think that anymore, but I was very from a moral perspective, I was very interested in that at the time. I was very vehement about that, and I was an anti-theist, and I disliked intensely Christianity. Now, my move away from progressivism actually began in a very strange place. It was in October of 2015, when I think it was October. It was the autumn of 2015, when the American candidate Bernie Sanders was deplatformed by Black Lives Matter, and I started disliking Black Lives Matter because of what they did. So that was sort of that was the crack in that. And I started being introduced to people like Sargon of Akkad. Actually, the person who introduced me to the sort of what you might call the anti-SJW side of YouTube was Ian Davis. He saw me.
Familiar.
Yeah, Ian Davis introduced me to the anti-SJW community, and I highly respect him for that. I thank him for that. He introduced me to Tom Sequitur. Sequitur introduced me to Edgy Sphinx, and Edgy Sphinx introduced me to Naked Ape. So that was my introduction to the anti-progressive community. And I became a sort of classical liberal, an atheist classical liberal. But I continued moving further right as 2016 went on, and I eventually got to the point where as I began researching philosophy, I recognized that a lot of the most pernicious people in history use moral grandstanding to make their case to the populace. And there came a point at the end of 2016 where I had a psychological breakdown because I couldn't reconcile my own moral thoughts with the idea that proposing morality to people as an argument generally does more harm than good.
Well, I'll say this: morality, and I think this really vivifies what Zimmy and Craig said. Morality cannot be asserted; it has to be demonstrated. That's why the work of art and the living saint are the expressions of morality, not the preacher telling you that you have to do this or some consequence. I think that I mean it's good to have those reminders. Don't get me wrong. I'm a little bit of a preacher myself, but morality has to be demonstrated. It can't be commended in the abstract.
So I would say that I'm very skeptical when it comes to ideas like the existence or non-existence of God. When I say skeptical, I don't mean that I doubt the existence or non-existence of God. When I say skeptical, I mean I don't think that knowledge about the existence or non-existence of God is attainable by human beings. And I have the same thoughts towards notions of objective morality. I think that morality is generally based on convention. And there's no way of demonstrating, in the absence of logic, there's no way of demonstrating that morality is objective in any way. You can't empirically demonstrate that morality is true. There's just no way of doing that.
Well, in another conversation, we would totally engage on this, but I think we're just sort of reminiscing about experiences. You guys have been so good. I'm seriously considering bringing in a few more people.
There's a guy on the chat.
Questions that don't apply to me.
Yeah, I know. So I was trying to keep the number down to 5 because I didn't want to have a big thing where we interrupt each other. But man, we're not having any interruptions, so I'm gonna roll the dice and invite 2 more people in who said they wanted to come on. So
if we invite Chris, we'll have lots of interruptions. Just a fair warning.
So who's this?
I think it'll be fine, guys. We're gonna keep the civil conversation going. We're gonna keep the civil conversation going.
I think after 6 people, you hit an invisible wall where it just breaks down.
Well, no, I mean, we'll talk about things. I want to hear more about. I mean, so Simi, I mean, you're obviously interested. But I'll throw this out to you. I'll just go before I start inviting more people. I'll just sort of direct the conversation generally where I was thinking. I think a lot about sociological trends, and I think that a lot of people mention specific years, and I think that 2015 and 2016 just asked a lot of questions that you didn't need to answer in 2007 and 2008.
Can I take it even farther back? Is that all right?
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and it's going to sound a little far-fetched, but just hear me out. Mm-hmm. I think the atomic bomb, the dropping of the atomic bomb, was the beginning of this. And I'm sorry if I offend any of the cultural relativists there, but I think that was where the cultural relativism kind of came to be a forefront in all of our minds, because that was the point in which we now saw the ends definitely can justify the means. So depending on our generation, I think what we were taught in school about the bomb in World War II, I guess my generation and kind of younger was taught, oh, it was horrible that we had to drop the bomb, and it was one of the evils that America has committed, and it was absolutely awful. A few generations prior, it was thank God for the bomb. It was the war would still be going, or the war would have gone longer, more people would have died. It's better that we dropped the bomb. That bomb saved my life if you were a soldier, or an American soldier. But that was the point, I believe, because I think about what happened after that. It was a sexual revolution. I mean, it took maybe a decade and a half, but following that, our entire idea of what was right and wrong kind of was allowed to be flipped upside down.
There's sort of a dimension in which, in the nuclear age, technology has come to be seen as the answer to all moral questions, in a way that you could arguably say it didn't before World War II.
Well, of course, and I think, but just kind of watching that progress and kind of naturally become what it has now. So now, bringing it up to a little more recent, the idea of, we're going to go a very Catholic issue on this, but contraception. Or abortion. Let's make it even easier. Abortion. This child is inconveniencing me, and to get rid of it would make my life better. And even though the actual action, this is not me agreeing, of course, even though the actual action is in itself wrong, it's taking a life, the ends of those horrible means are justified, because eventually it'll play out. And I think that we can see that kind of repeating itself in many of the cultural issues we have now.
And do you think that this is sort of this is strongly linked to the end of World War II? I mean, something definitely happened in World War II. Sorry, go ahead, Josh.
I think I'm not sure how old you are, Zimmy, but I had like a totally different experience. I think homeschooling might have been the part of it. I forgot to mention that in my terrible intro, but it was posed as this is what happened. This were the alternatives. This were the other alternatives, and it was like 9 years old sitting there thinking about, like, was the atomic bomb morally justified?
So it was more asking the question of the students and kind of discussing it?
I mean, it was my sister and I, but that's
wonderful. That's why I'm homeschooling my children right there.
Yeah.
No, we had it pushed down our throats that America was evil. And to answer your question, I'm about mid-20s. So that was definitely pushed on us to whenever we covered it, and we would be shown mostly the pictures of the Japanese after the radiation. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar. I don't want to get too off topic with World War II, but I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Smithsonian and the Enola Gay conflict that happened, or the exhibit that they wanted to have on the Enola Gay, the plane that dropped the bombs. And the first exhibit was one way, which was completely anti-American, anti-bomb. And the veterans protested. Then they redid it. And a few years later, it was completely anti-Japan, very pro-American. And now finally, we have something pretty decent. And it's kind of first perspective and primary sources of each, leader of each country, and then a civilian of each country. And it's really done really well. But that's, again, off topic. But go on.
But I think if you look at religious trends after World War II, there was sort of an explosion. There was a revivification of Europe, of religion after World War I, after World War II. But then slowly, I think after World War II, after the height of basically 1951, it just sort of sloped down since then. I think that's something that needs to be explained. It sort of cries out for an explanation. I don't know if I really have one.
Hello?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Was it? Did she want to reply to that?
I'm sorry, you kind of cut out a bit. So you're saying there was no real explanation for?
Oh, I was just saying that I think you mentioned that World War II may have created a great amount of relativism. It may have been. Yeah. I didn't know if that's what you meant.
That is, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I mean,
I think there's a good case for that, is what I'm saying, right? I think that
there's
a very good case for that, right?
John Paul II and actually Tolkien as well have a lot of really great articles on that. I'm going to go ahead and find those while you guys are.
You know what I think, actually? Can I elaborate on that, on your ideas, to me?
Sure.
Because I think, you know, when World War II happened, we basically just went with the propaganda, right? Like, the Nazis were totally cartoonishly bad, and Allied Bomber Command did do nothing wrong, right? That was the thing, right? And in order to create that totally cartoonish history of events, we had to transform morality from being an action to morality being a side, right? And I think that since then we've kind of gone to almost I like to call the Islamic or progressive view of morality, that morality isn't something attendant to actions or faith. It's attendant to specific political causes that are either ascendant or in remission. But that's just my theory. Sorry, Fritz, did you want to say something?
Hey, everyone. Yeah, I actually had something directly to say on this. Is that I'm a big student of World War I, and I actually think you could take the idea of the sides even further back, because of if you look at a lot of the propaganda that back in World War I, that especially on the Allied side, there was a huge emphasis that this was a war for civilization. This is the do or die war for Christian civilization against these barbaric, evil Huns. And well, I don't think, and certainly I think it, partially was reciprocated on both sides. But the interesting thing I find is, if you look at, it's really interesting if you look at World War I propaganda. And I think I'll actually leave a link in the side chat to a site which shows all the posters. But if you look at like German propaganda from the First World War, it sort of shows the Allies as these sort of cartoonish little characters that you don't really take very seriously, and just portrays the Germans in these actually quite beautiful artwork as brave. The Germans and Austrians as like brave soldiers and all whatnot. But if you look at the Allies, a lot of it sort of portrays the Germans as sort of just subhuman monsters, very similar to how the Nazis would portray the Jews. And this goes back to the idea that this was, morality in this sense. It was more or less whatever's on the side of us, which would be by 1917 the side of liberal democracy, free and fair elections, and no more monarchies except for, powerless constitutional ones. And that won out. And I think you eventually just started through the conflicts of the 20th century.
So you think it was the conflicts of the 20th century?
Yeah. And I think that the narrative that of the right side of history sort of developed as liberal democracies in the form of predominantly France, the UK, and America, won the First World War, the Second World War, and came out on top of the Cold War. That sort of set the narrative that what's moral, even if they say morality is now relative, what people think of as moral, i.e. the right side of history, is sort of a fairly arbitrary thing. It just happened that the people that were on the right side of history
the 20th century. But I see that Craig had something to say. Did you want to?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we've got to go a lot further back when we're talking about moral relativism, particularly in our culture. I think it goes back to the Reformation when the cult of our culture split apart, and Luther, pushed against the legitimate authority of the church, and
I think he just said it wasn't Luther. I'm sorry.
Let him talk. I want to hear this.
Yeah. So the Reformation happened and grew, and then, but there was no internal coherence or agreement on what was to be reformed. It was really a revolution, And so you had Christendom just split into, a myriad of different mutually exclusive and groups that didn't agree with each other. And so that was really the roots of, the kind of relativism that we have today, because there was no authority that said your view of this is the right view or the wrong view. If you disagreed, you just, went and started your own new church.
No, I'm going to hold on before anyone responds to this. I'm going to say one thing. I want to entertain this conversation for about 5 more minutes, but I want to take this back to historical events that have happened in our own lives before we start debating over whether moral relativism starts in the Neolithic age. Okay,
it really starts in the Garden of Eden, district.
Yeah, I know.
It starts with the snake when you don't rescue your father.
Yes. So was anyone who wanted to give any more additional historical things? But I was hoping that we could just talk about. I mean, I think that 9/11 is something that we all experienced, right?
Actually, my experiences through 9/11 sort of combined into sort of like every year when they would show the footage again and again and again. It's sort of combined into one. But if I could say something on this, and this is I think point directly related to what I think you want us to talk about, is that me being a younger millennial in my early 20s who didn't really experience the 90s, I think that probably has a big impact as to why I would say younger millennials and Generation Z seem to be becoming be one of the most conservative generations, because we didn't grow up during a time in which the sexual revolution or just secularism and liberalism seemed to be validated with the 80s and 90s prosperity. We grew up as it's completely destabilizing, and we have one crisis every year after another.
So, Zimmy, do you think that? I know, like, that was a very good point about World War II, but did you see like current events or anything like that shaping your own perspective on I don't know, these questions? I tend to think that things that happened in our own lifetimes had a huge impact.
Absolutely. With the whole George Bush era, I was, unfortunately, I was extremely liberal Democrat, even though I was extremely young. I was like 10 to whatever, but during George Bush's era. But I made it a hobby to critique the president, and was very upset that I had to go to high school instead of going to the protests from his inauguration. But I was just destroyed. But I basically formed my identity on being this young, like, I'm not going to say socialist, but I basically was, and just hating the president so much. He could not do anything right.
It was
and
so
then
cool
Obama,
to hate Bush, wasn't it?
It was the cool thing to do. And now I feel like I'm the older person looking down on these little punks who are criticizing Donald Trump, and it seems like exactly the same way. I'm like, was I this ridiculous? And like, yeah, you probably were.
Here's the thing.
But
I think that actually criticism of Donald Trump is something a lot staler than George Bush was.
Well, it depends on how they do it. There's legitimate criticism, but like I was saying last night, they criticize him on such silly things. Like, the man, he's not just plain stupid. He's misguided. He doesn't have the biggest vocabulary, but you don't get to be where he is by just being plain stupid. I'm sorry.
I think Bush was actually, I think that, I don't know, maybe I'm misremembering this because I was younger, but it seemed like the Bush hysteria was a little bit more edgy when it came out. Trevor Noah, the stuff just clangs. I question whether young people can actually respond to that.
Well, let's put it this way. We never would have had a ridiculous display of, Bill Nye's gender theory when I was a kid.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm so glad you brought that up.
That would have been lame, not cool now. Is it cool now? I don't know what the kids are talking about. Is that shit cool? I don't know.
That cannot be cool, right? Like, I have to say this. When I saw the Sex Junk music video, I became utterly convinced. I had to watch it 5 times, but I became utterly convinced that essentially almost no social gain that progressives have said is permanent and unmovable is actually permanent and unmovable. Like, these people do not know how to actually present a coherent view of sexuality in the culture. And furthermore, the existence of that ridiculously terrible piece of art, it mocked the notion that essentially conservative culture was in control. this was the mainstream, right? I mean,
Well,
that was
like being honest would never convince anybody, so they have to resort to these ridiculous tactics in order to try and convince people. If they were honest, they would say, "Well, I kind of want to do this, so I'm okay with it."
I mean,
And that's
the thing,
not a good
oh,
argument.
sorry. I mean, the thing I find interesting is that like people like if they tried to because they constantly try and like promote these views like separately, one at a time, like transgenderism is cool, gay, homosexuality is fine, but when they sort of put it all together into one, just like the sex junk, that is the sexual revolution embodied. That is 50 years of sexual libertinism embodied in one music video. And it seems like everyone from, the classical liberals, skeptics to us, just completely find it just horrifying.
I've only.
And it's like this is what it looked. This is what the sexual revolution. Sorry, this is my main point. Is this is what the sexual revolution looks like, just completely on display.
To be honest, to be perfectly honest, anybody being that open about sex, regardless if they're straight, gay or transgender or whatever, is disgusting.
I've noticed basically like
anybody who's that open about their sexuality it's gross.
The most far left, like coastal elite people that I know were like, yeah, this is cool, and like even like some like pretty left wing people are like, this is weird. I don't want to watch this.
Would you? That's interesting. I haven't met. None of my progressive friends seem to think that this was a good performance.
A lot of my progressive friends are Christian.
Oh, okay.
I think it's becoming a slow wake up for them.
That's so sad. The second that they finally go full progressive will be the second it becomes uncool. They'll forever be chasing the tail of the dog. They'll never actually be arriving. They'll get to these cultural trends the second they become really, really passe and stupid, even in the popular culture.
So
again, how can
sorry, Zimi, what did you say?
Oh, sorry. With the sex junk thing, I mean, it was just objectively bad, no matter your politics. It was just badly written, badly everything, bad voice, bad dancing, just everything. And I wonder, do you think that the culture would have accepted it more if it was done in a more aesthetic way, I guess?
I want you to answer that, but before, one point of order, guys. Does somebody have this playing in the background, or is it just me?
Mine is muted.
Okay, I'm hearing a little bit of an echo. That's all. Must be me. Sorry, go ahead. So
as a bad amateur lyric writer, I think it would have been accepted much better if it was like at least half-assed. Sorry for cursing on your channel, but like it wasn't even that much effort.
Half keistered.
Yes.
No,
So at least it had a cringy
totally
cartoon.
what was this? What was this?
Oh, at least it had a really cringy cartoon to go right before it.
Oh gosh.
Softened up the blow.
What was that, Zimi?
Oh, it was nothing important. I just said I asked about profanity, and I was given the green light. So saying.
Swearing is not on the channel if it's in good taste, and
Fuck
when you're
yes.
describing sex junk, swearing is in good taste. But I think the thing is, I think sex junk it asks you to imagine things as heroic that are just of their very nature not heroic, like enjoying a fleshlight in the cold moonlight.
Oh,
I mean, there's no way like the
Prime.
celebration of that is being this heroic moment of self-actualization. And it comes off as like the most pathetic thing imaginable. I mean,
okay.
it's cringy. It's
Okay.
cringe-inducing.
This type of thing should be a sketch,
Wait.
like a sketch comedy thing, but it's real.
Do you guys remember the song "I Just Had Sex"?
yeah.
It's like that, but with no self-awareness.
Right.
It's almost like that. That almost seems sort of quaint now, doesn't it? It's just like
Oh yeah.
I had
It's
sex.
very prudish.
It's like
So let's talk about to get to a more. Some of the people in the stream are kind of hinting towards the extreme trad Catholic. I was called not a trad, which I take offense to, sir. I wear a mantilla. I have you know. So no, let's really talk about why is that so cringy? Why is fleshlight in the cold moonlight? Like, is we're going to critique masturbation here?
But no. What it does is it takes something that is implicitly not romantic and an act of just self-pleasuring, and it thrusts it forcefully into I know. It thrusts it forcefully into an imagistic as romantic, right? So it tries to reposition something that is entirely unromantic in a romantic setting, and you see the poison being introduced in that moment.
Totally.
Can I try and
go for it.
First of all, I think a good way of explaining my sex junk is no trad left on the tires. Shut up. I think people have sort of a visceral reaction against being reminded of somebody else's sexual fluids because it can make you sick. It could actually make you physically ill.
Ooh.
If you come into the wrong kind of contact with another person's, the fluids that come out of their sexual organs. And I think people have.
You think it's that basic, though? I think that it's much
basic.
more on an interpersonal level. I think that you could have eroticism that was very raunchy in terms of the description of what was going on, as long as that eroticism involved some kind of human will, emotion, and sacrifice.
Right. I think I think you might be right about that. I think specifically when you're not attracted to the other person, it's extremely disgusting. Something becomes disgusting. Something becomes disgusting when it otherwise wouldn't be.
The fleshlight and the pale moonlight. That's not why I don't like it. The thing is, it's taking like things that are incredibly cheap and don't cost anything and don't involve any emotion, and then it's trying to like contextualize them in this theater, right? And it just sounds masturbatory. I mean, it is masturbatory. What am I talking about?
Right.
But,
so it's
transparent. Masturbation can't be romantic. It just can't.
It's
right?
it's aesthetically different from the ideas of romance that you have.
Mm-hmm.
It's aesthetically different than the rules of romance that have been established since Christian art began, which that love is sacrifice,
Since Rome, exactly.
Are you guys familiar with John Paul II's theology of the body at all?
I am. Zimmy, you're on point. You're bringing these things up before I can think of them. Go for it.
I mean, I'm not too well versed. My priest would be very disappointed in me, but I as soon as I hear this, the reason I asked the question initially is why is it that we're so just repulsed by this? And yeah, of course, Dave, you're right about it's trying to romanticize something that just cannot be romanticized. But why is that? And it's because it's degrading a human being, whether it's giving you're consenting to being degrading. I think in some ways, our more primal urges find that stuff attractive. But are you guys aware that a lot of these horrible, disgusting fetishes are created in the moment of looking for pornography? So not to get too vulgar here, but so basically
you're getting a swear license, so go for it.
Okay, well, it's more just like teacherly like vulgarity. So basically, while you're aroused and you're looking for certain videos or whatever you're looking for, sometimes you stumble across things that normally would absolutely repulse you. But in that state of mind, when those chemicals are pumping through your brain, you find things that normally are absolutely repulsive to actually be appealing, and it starts to kind of fold itself into your normal sexual identity of what you find arousing. And then you might find yourself seeking those things out when normally it was just be completely repulsive to you. Now look at the sexual
right.
Look at us traditionalists talking about sex. They say we can't have fun.
And a traditionalist talking about science.
I get in on it.
Anarcho, what was it? Go ahead.
Well, I think what I find the most irritating about the entire song is that, or the entire performance, I should say, is that, first of all, can I just clarify what age, what demographic the Bill Nye shows aimed at?
I think it's us and
young adults. I think
it's like teenagers and young adults.
Ugh.
Right.
Yeah, 18 to 34, maybe.
The problem I have with the performance is that it's basically failing to appeal to any audience. Like if they wanted to just entertain like adults and make something really gross, but do it for a comedic effect, it's kind of stupid television. But that's that's been that way for a while. It's just another fun part of modernity, and we get a lot more stupidity in our mass media. We get basically train stupid people to be stupid people. It's a great time. But what I hate about that performance in specifically is that it's way too juvenile, even given current standards of media, to really appeal to anyone who doesn't think of sex as like they respect it. And I'm not even necessarily talking about like social conservatives. I'm just talking about even normal liberals don't see it as scandalous. To see it as scandalous takes it basically, that seems to be a product of a prepubescent mind where you think, ooh,
it kind of felt like after school special, right?
Yeah,
it's an after school special, but the content is not appropriate to show at kids at that age, and yet it's way too stupid even for people of our young adults or even teenagers to think it's a good idea. So it's
completely.
I can almost imagine just like a mom trying to doing something similar to this, which is like, hey, we're gonna try. It's like it's like to teach kids about the sexual revolution. We're gonna do a hip rap battle or a hip rap song.
Did anyone? This is like a side thing that really bothered me. Did anyone find it like extremely upper crust, like she's talking about like bagels and lox, and I'm thinking like,
oh gosh, I was commenting on Mouthy Buddha's video when he did his video on it.
That's like expensive enough that I can only afford to have it like once every 2 months, and it's just like in just every day. Oh, this is a great thing to write a song about, and I'm just like this is the most unrelatable song I've ever heard because I was like all like the sexual stuff, and then also you have to be like a yuppie to relate to.
I'm still just confused as to why they included that. Is it just like that she wanted to like shove like hey, bagels and lox and schmear, like, hey, I'm like a quirky Jewish girl.
Yeah,
laugh at me.
That probably was the reason.
She's indoctrinating the goy. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say
that? Pull, get out of here, please.
That would get rid of half of us.
I'm sorry.
Well, I do.
Shut it down.
Sorry.
Shut it down.
Yeah, I'm hearing some interruptingness going on, so let's all take a chill pill. So, one thing I wanted to say though, I'm really grateful for this Bill Nye stuff. It reminded me a lot of the queer kids stuff thing on YouTube. I mean, the existence of these things that are directed towards children. It really exposes the emperor as having no clothes, because in that environment, no one can rightly believe that traditionalism rules the roost when it comes to establishing sexual ethics. And that was always the premise for basically treating these baroque sexualities as being heroic. And in an environment where they're being promoted on mainstream television, they can no longer be presented as heroic at all.
What I find funny is I like how what does everybody know is the funnier version? All the memes people made of it were like the little ice cream sketch where guess what people are laughing at? They're not laughing at or being entertained by the sketch. They're laughing at the picture where it shows the vanilla ice cream has put all the other ice creams in the microwave.
Yeah, with 1488 on the timer.
I don't think many people are laughing at that. I think that's a very...
Oh, I know a lot of people who are laughing at that.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, the 1488?
Yeah. The people who are laughing at memes are all on poll, and they're not in the mainstream. So
no, I know these people.
Let's take a step back, guys.
F-bombs okay. Poll references no.
Hey, I'm not. Hey, poll references are fine. I'm just saying. Once you think poll references are mainstream, though, you're not talking about reality anymore. Bill Nye is mainstream.
Mm-hmm. I mean, isn't that? I guess that it's sort of like when the religious right tried to have all their cool stuff like Jesus raps and stuff like that back in the 90s, and it's like this is now when the progressives are doing it. And it's like so they're mainstream enough that they're not cool anymore.
Although I will say that Christian metal is generally awesome. It's pretty good.
Yes,
like Candlemass is really good.
And
ever heard of
that
Under Oath?
No, I haven't.
No, they're a little screamy, but I remember them being pretty good.
Oh yeah,
and I did hear from
Mortification is like that.
And I did hear that from our friend Ben McLean said that Adventures in Odyssey, the focus on the family radio play. Well, I mean, from his mouth, he says that is apparently parts of that became some of the best radio play since Orson Welles.
I actually really like radio plays. I'll have to give that a listen to. But
it was made for kids, but I think I think that Christian movies are starting to actually get better now. Like that movie Risen and that movie Silence. I thought those were both pretty good.
I don't know. Silence was. Silence.
I'm trying to throw you a bone. I'm trying to throw the Catholics a bone here.
I get the feeling that over the past 2 years, Christians in media have sort of gotten their heads out of their asses.
What they've realized is
very little. This might just be my perspective, but in very little time at all, Christians went from being, at least in the popular media, went from being rather unintelligent to being the most intelligent people in the conversation.
Maybe you're just paying attention now.
No, I think that Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell are still lunatics.
We Catholics don't claim them. They're just heretics.
And, fucking Joel Osteen.
Oh my God!
Echo quotes Osteen.
Osteen is my favorite Catholic.
Okay, you can have Father James Martin then.
That's a Jesuit. I'll take him.
Are just trading names now?
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess we're sort of getting on to, I think, the discussion of Christian art and why it's gotten, I would say, a little bit better. It needs to make up a lot of ground, but I think it's dropped the pretense that it's somehow the mainstream, or it needs to appeal to the mainstream. Because great art doesn't appeal to the mainstream. It tries to attack a deep human truth.
Right.
It could be a very hard truth, right? When I read someone like one of my favorite Christian authors or Catholic authors, I don't know, maybe Zimi or Craig, do you know about these people? This woman, Flannery O'Connor.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
Yeah, she's amazing, right?
I have a peacock flask, and it's because of her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, thanks to Flannery
Catholic.
O'Connor, the peacock item is now mandatory for every Catholic household.
I knew it.
She's wonderful, though.
Yes, but there's no way you can make Flannery O'Connor mainstream. She's medieval in thought. She's crude in perspective. She's I keep on using the word primal, and that's what great art is, right? It's not something that's so desperately trying to grasp after what's hot. And I think that Christian art, it saw itself as being mainstream. It wanted to assure everyone that it was mainstream, even though it wasn't mainstream, and that wasn't honest. And now at least Christian art as a counterculture can be more honest, and good art has to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is one of the things that Peterson really nails. I've been thinking about this a lot for a few months. But one of the things he says is that artists go out into the unknown. And what we're seeing here is now that Christianity is not the cultural juggernaut that it was for 1,500 years, the Christian artists have re-entered unknown territory. So instead of a lot of Christian art basically just being propaganda, because it wasn't entering the unknown.
Well, I think Christian art was good when Christianity was the mainstream, and it's probably good when Christianity is the minority. But what it is not good at is when it's not the mainstream, but it thinks it is and pretends to be.
Or when it's
that's the deadly dishonesty.
That and
I
also
think that
when it's trying to attach itself to the modern world that ultimately hates it anyway.
Right. This is a point of I guess what Jesus meant when he spoke of the hypocrites. It's sort of, you cannot spread a message that transcends basic materialistic desires through a system that is designed primarily through that way. I was going to ask a question actually. Distributors, how much of Christian art that comes out these days is public domain upon creation?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure almost none of it. I'm pretty sure it's all super capitalized, privatized.
Exactly. And so how can it, if it's designed as a product meant to appeal to the masses for profit, how is that going to help aid with the message of Christianity?
That's why we have my YouTube channel, which is Creative Commons Share Alike, people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the future.
So I have a question. What do you mean by
Go for it.
Oh, what do you mean by Christian or Catholic art specifically? Are you talking just like the occasional prayer book, like you mentioned, Father Martin? Would that count, for example, or are we talking movies only?
I was thinking specifically of creative works. I was kidding when I said my YouTube channel. This is just commentary.
Oh.
What I mean is people creating movies, short stories, comics,
Music.
things that people would consume for entertainment purposes, but might have an edifying message nonetheless.
So like top
podcast
40
maybe?
Christian music
I guess podcasts would count. Sure,
I
podcast.
guess, I mean, it's really hard for me to answer that question personally because I'm so in it. Like like I said, I work for the church, so nearly everyone I see on a given day is totally plugged into the Catholic podcast, like the Catholic Stuff You Should Know, which I highly recommend. Blogs like Bad Catholic, like these are things that we just constantly have in our vocabulary and just what we talk about. So I don't know. And then the Catholic bookstore specifically, it kind of gets melded in with the Austines, unfortunately. And it's kind of hard to differentiate between them. But Pope Francis, I think, is doing as much as I disagree with the man, he's doing a lot to kind of bring it into more mainstream. And he has a few kids' books out and things like that. But again, I have trouble knowing if that is just my little world and it seems pretty easy to get a hold of, or
I think,
but on a large scale, yeah.
Can I make a comment on this?
One at a time, guys.
Okay.
I want to bring more people in, but only people are good about letting each other talk.
I'll let St. Clair go first.
I'm sorry. I think that it's a lot easier to be popular than it is to stick to the principles of your philosophy. And it's very obvious to me that Francis is choosing the former and not the latter. So that's why he's trying to. When you say that the Catholic Church is trying to be more mainstream, the Catholic Church has always tried to do that. It's always tried to go with where the cultural tide was headed, and you might say that causes the church to last longer, and I think it does. But what is it at that point?
Well, can I answer that question? Because I hear this a lot. Pope Francis is indeed swayed by the political winds, as all popes have been. If Pope Francis had been living in the 11th century, his encyclicals would include flattering things about France. If he was living in the 15th century, they'd be very flattering towards the Medicis. You know, I mean, we know that political winds blow through the church. We know that, or Catholics believe that these political winds don't harm the doctrine. Now, I guess you could argue, you could say that the political winds that blow hurt the missionary work of the church. Some would say that they help it, but I think that's an open question for debate among Catholics.
Mm-hmm. I think, what I was going to say is that I think when it comes to the music, and I think what you said, Zimitz, is that I think the issue is trying to break out into secular culture is because the thing is, with Christian music, the popular modern Christian music, some of it is actually does start actually bleeding into the secular culture, where you even have like sort of mainstream pop artists like trying to go towards a more gospel centered or gospel type albums and stuff like that. And also like there's tons of people who probably I can think of that, like, you know, listen to somebody like Chris Tomlin, you know, like probably the biggest Christian artist, listen to Christian music, even if they're not Christian. So I think that, I don't know, it seems like in the realm of music, Christian art seems to have not suffered as much. But I think that is always the difficult part, is trying to get it to bleed over to secular culture, because you need to get stuff that says something to the secular world that can understand it or like it without being Christian first.
Right. Actually, can I say something about this?
Go for it.
I love music, and I love I am a huge not fan of Christian music, just Christian music proper, like the Chris Tomlins, and basically my tolerance for it extends maybe about the hour long we use it for contemporary mass, and even then I'm kind of squirming. But beyond that, I really never listen to it. However, when it comes to artists that just happen to be Christian and write about what their heart and their soul are saying, which is what most artists do when they write songs. They write about what's going on with them. And it just happens to be thinking about God and higher things. So, for example, I really love Josh Garrels. I really love Mumford and Sons. Well, at least I used to. But Mumford and Sons was, again, one of those that would write about things that are not necessarily Christian. You have atheists singing along to these songs, and it appealed to something in their nature, whether they realized it was there or not. There's something deeper and kind of hit them in the heart. And I think that stuff is actually just more valuable. I could easily turn off and I could never hear a Chris Tomlin song again and be totally fine. You know,
actually, to be honest, I feel the same way. Like when I because I'm a more or less an evangelical myself, and I had sort of a born again experience around 15, 16, and I was really into him. But like as I've gotten older, my tastes have changed, and I like really old time. I like a lot of like stuff from the 18th and 19th century sort of revival hymns, and Baptist revival hymns from the old, a long time ago. But there's a few like modern Christian artists I like, but I think the bigger thing is that like it is interesting to see that like I've heard like contemporary pop artists trying to like sort of say like start making overtures towards gospel music or Christianity. I think there's always a big influence in this stuff, even throughout history. Like one thing I remember is like the song "The Internationale." That is a religious song. That is a religious song in terms of like the feelings it's trying to evoke.
Yeah, well, here's what I think. I kind of have sort of, you might say, reverential or pseudo-spiritual experiences when I listen to deistic music, but I don't have the same feelings when I listen to Christian music. And I think it generally has to do with the aesthetic. It has to do with the type of music itself. Like, for example, my favorite band in the world is a Platonist band called Epica. They are a symphonic metal band, and they are Platonists, but they're very anti-Christian, which is weird. And they're anti-organized religion.
Okay, that sort of explains it.
Their music just like really tugs at my heartstrings, as the saying goes. And it's Platonistic, but I think it has to do with the music itself and not exactly what's being said. And I think when people talk about spiritual experiences when they're looking at media, I think it's very much down to the aesthetics and not the message itself.
So there's something from if it's okay if we change it a little bit to stick on art, but in the chat, someone brought up one of my favorite topics to talk about, which is going to sound really bad, but it's Piss Christ. And
go for it.
People
It's a great
hate
place to start.
I have a
Can you explain what that is?
Oh yeah, so it was an artist, I forgot his name, but he claims he's Christian. That doesn't really matter to me, actually. So Piss Christ is it's a selection of photos that he's taken that is a crucifix, and they're actually pretty beautiful if you don't know what it is. But it's a crucifix in this kind of spooky golden light, and they're in jars of urine. My first thought is this is horrible. Even against my libertarian sensibilities, I'm like, someone needs to punch this guy in the face. Like, and then
I should add here, this was the subject of a very large controversy in the 80s with the Catholic. This is the last series of the Catholics had of trying to put the wraps on some kind of anti-Christian art.
Right, sorry, and I wasn't. I've only been Catholic for about 4 years, so I probably wasn't really fully aware when this was going on. I only really came across it in the last few years, and there's this one nun, and she's so adorable, and she's like an art history just expert. And someone was interviewing her and asking her about it, and she had an amazing response, which was, I think it's very important, because that is what we do to Christ every day, is we completely degrade him. And she says, I think it's beautiful. And that just hit me like a ton of bricks. And we want to think of ourselves as holding Christ as being so important. And, you can't even put a crucifix on the ground. And, we have to esteem him, and we genuflect at Mass, and we bow at the altar. And then we go home, and we basically, in our own private lives, in one way or another, every time we sin, we are putting Christ in a jar of piss. Like we are contributing to his nailing on the cross every time we sin. And that can be, we can get into that whole theology of how that works. But that's what I think about. I actually, when I see or hear Piss Christ, I think it's very important.
And then at the end of the week, we spend 45 minutes in a kind of feigned genuflection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the homily makes us feel nice for a few minutes, and then we leave, and we ignore the bum on the way to the parking lot. It's amazing.
It's like Jim Gaffigan going like a joke in Turkey. He goes, "Can we wrap this up? I've got some sinning to do."
Yes, and it's funny because it's true. I mean, it's horrible, and we're gonna be. These are the things that we really need to polish out of our soul. That are we need to laugh about, or else we will be in an endless state of despair. But these are actual things that need to be polished down in our soul, and I think it's important to recognize them.
That's a very subtle. That's a very hard lesson to learn from a piece of art. I think that interpretation makes it very powerful. I've heard that interpretation before, and
really.
Yeah, it's something to think about, but yeah, that is very powerful. I think in some sense, I think what people were upset about was the fact that it was a symbol. It was a symbol that essentially there could be no standards of decency that could be reasonably pushed back against by churches, which was a big change from the '60s.
Right.
Okay, Craig, do you have to go soon?
Yeah, I kind of need to as well. I'm on the East Coast as well.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Do you have anything else you want to talk about? I don't know if you're going to go right now or stay for a few more minutes.
I can hang around for a minute or two, but just taking it. No, I just want to say a large part of my silence is that I had no idea what you guys were talking about for a fair portion of the time. With the junk sex thing. I totally missed whatever that was, and I'm really glad I did, based on everybody's description of it. So it was,
bullet.
Yeah, you're lucky you don't know what that is.
But I feel that way. I feel like there's certain things I'll often find out. I'll read something in the Google News or something like that, and I'm like, wow, I'm totally glad I missed that. And so thank you for confirming me in my almost complete renunciation of television and most major forms of media.
This
is you still got a YouTube. You're not safe.
This is why Bandit conspiracy is clutch.
Yeah. No, it's this has been fun. I'm glad I'm glad I was a little bit distracted when I was working on something earlier today at work. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for dropping by. I think we'll keep the stream going for a little bit longer.
Oh, one more thing before I head out. Sorry. Someone just brought up Tolkien really quick.
Yes.
Ben Bassett. So Tolkien is one of my absolute heroes, and I don't think my husband would mind if I shared that. Tolkien, in his own way, saved kind of my view of marriage. And, you kind of get that, that after a few years, you start getting oh, man. Marriage is fucking hard, man. So they had, he has a letter to his son. I really hope everyone looks into it, and I'll probably comment it once the video is up. But he wrote a letter to his son about marriage, and Tolkien, one of the wisest Catholic writers of all time. And I'm sorry, Lord of the Rings is a Catholic work. And those people who don't want to recognize that, I'm sorry, you're dead wrong.
We have Narnia.
Did someone just read?
Lord of the Rings is definitely better than Narnia.
The Lord of the Rings is an alt-right work.
All right, I'll take it.
It's about the men of the West fighting against the evil dark-skinned people.
Sauron is the red pill.
Anyway, I hope you guys all look into Tolkien and his letter to his son on marriage, and he basically talks about how you're gonna be married, it's gonna be very difficult, and he says no man in his right mind will ever be in the place where he is gonna wisely make the choice to get married until he's near death. Because it's a very risky thing. No one's arguing that. He says your soulmate, is not someone that you're briefly attracted to, and you think, oh, well, what if this is it? What if I made a mistake and this is actually my soulmate and I'm married to the wrong person? And he says very wisely, he says your soulmate is not the person you're currently attracted to. It's the person you are married to. And I loved that so much, and it just changed the way I looked at it. And he says, whatever you do, make the Eucharist the center of your marriage. And I'm almost gonna cry. Oh my god, holy shit! No, but I just love that so much, and I really encourage you guys to look into Tolkien. Thank you for bringing him up, Ben.
Okay, that was a really weird swear to be using at that particular moment, I have to say.
I'm a walking contradiction.
Actually, considering it was marriage, it was a very appropriate one. But Zimmy, before you leave, you have to tell us what your YouTube channel is, because.
Oh, my YouTube. Oh gosh, it's still very young. But it's my current name, which is ZIMYIX, ZimmyX, or Zimmy Roman numeral 9 is what it is. Yeah, that's me. I was on Mouthy Buddha's thing, and I'm on there as well. So, all right. I hope to do this again, though. I love having Catholic conversations. I hope to get more into things like, transubstantiation and stuff like that on another one, if you'd be willing.
You'll notice also that there's sort of an ideas Catholic community and a normie Catholic community on YouTube. So you kind of switch between the two of them too.
Is this really the Catholic community though? Because you've got a bunch of Protestants here.
Oh no, I'm saying there's people.
Fucking killed me.
Also, I'm a Latter-day Saint, so there's that.
That's a Protestant.
What, did you just say you're a Mormon? What?
Close enough.
Oh.
He's part of the cooler Mormons, RLDS.
The multiple wives ones, or the?
No.
Are you diet? Do you guys allow Diet Coke or no?
The RLDS were the radically anti-polygamy Latter-day Saints.
So which side of the Diet Coke debate do you guys fall on?
Is there caffeine in it?
Pepsi.
So is it Pepsi? Good answer. No, is it a caffeine thing, or is it a hot beverage thing with Mormons? There's two different debates I've heard. I have a few Mormon friends.
I'm not sure entirely what's going on with the. Somebody's echoing.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not the only person hearing that. Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard it.
I can't.
I'm hearing it as well.
I can't think when somebody's echoing.
Yeah, I've heard it the whole time, but I haven't said anything because it doesn't really bother me.
How about everyone mute themselves except for people who need to talk?
I'm not
Check,
talking.
check. Okay, it went away. Well, I mean, if you're actually interested in that, that would just completely derail the conversation, though. And
If you could do it briefly
do
in the
that.
next 10 minutes, that'd be awesome.
Well, okay. One of the revelations that came is said to have come through Joseph Smith is called the Word of Wisdom, and it says that it was not a commandment from God, but it was some sort of advice or counsel to do with health. And one of the things it says is that coffee is not so good. But it's important to understand that this is not a commandment that you can't ever drink coffee. It said, it said, I don't have it in front of me. I'd have to look it up. But the Mormons in Utah have, to some extent, started treating it like it's a commandment when it's wasn't ever supposed to be. And so that's going a little too far as I'm concerned. And the echo is back.
Yeah.
That's me, by the way. It was the Jew the entire time.
He's the anarchist, ruining stability in our stream.
We need to get Gabriel Syme here to get to duel him.
Well, anyway, I was going to say, Fritz, you don't actually have Narnia because Lewis was sort of an Anglican who was pretty Catholic.
All right, Anglicans are Protestant Catholics.
Yeah, I had my
Anglicans,
marriage.
go ahead.
I had my marriage prep done by an Anglican priest that had been reintegrated into the Catholic Church, and I had to resist the entire time asking them how many of my wife's heads I could cut off.
You're terrible.
Are you guys familiar with the Anglican Ordinate? That may be what you're talking about, but
Yeah, that is. It is. It's the number of Anglican priests that were reintegrated to the Catholic Church during.
Yeah.
I think it was Pope Benedict.
Well, the Catholics have Lord of the Rings, but the Protestants do have
C.S. Lewis.
sort of.
The Protestants have
Paradise
their
Lost.
life now, guys.
I was
We have
gonna
Paradise
say-
Lost.
Yes, Paradise Lost is what I was going to say, and also Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan.
I would say Pilgrim's Progress and Paradise Lost they're Protestant because they actually embody Protestant theology.
Pilgrim's Progress.
Whereas C.S. Lewis's Narnia, it's too close. It's so close to Catholicism that
It could be either one. Honestly,
Yeah.
it's very vague, and it focuses too much on the fiction and not enough on the metaphor aspect of it.
I think it's trying not to be denominational, you know.
Yeah, I think that Narnia is trying very hard not to be controversial, except it does have some stuff that is a little bit anti-Calvinist.
Well, I'm not a Calvinist, so it's
Well,
fine.
I'm a little bit anti-Calvinist, so
I think everyone should be an anti-Calvinist.
I'm glad. I'm more or less a recent convert away from Presbyterianism. So
everyone's a little bit anti-Calvinist sometimes, guys.
that's I think that's amazing. People of all different religious backgrounds can all agree that Calvinism sucks.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, all you have
Yeah.
to know is what Calvinism is.
To know it is to hate it.
no, to paraphrase Frederick Hayek, if Calvinists understood Christianity, they wouldn't be Calvinists.
Yeah.
He said the same thing about
Wow.
socialists and economics.
Well, Calvinism is where you get liberalism from.
How
At
is
least,
that?
at least social liberalism.
What's determinism?
How is that? How do you get social liberalism from Calvinism? I don't understand that.
All of the original classical liberal thinkers, Hutcheson, John Locke, were Calvinists.
Locke was a Calvinist.
Yes, he was.
I guess he didn't really think that,
No, wait.
The thing about Locke, he never quite thought through all the implications of that empiricism idea of his, did he?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said Bach was a Calvinist.
Oh,
The Locke
Locke.
was base Lutheran.
Yeah, I know. He was Lutheran. Anyway. So, Craig, if you have to go, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having it, and thanks for letting me hang out.
Hopefully, we'll have another stream sometime where we can discuss things like this in a super cash fashion.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Let's
hope to see
get
you guys
into some
around.
theology and history, and yeah, maybe some.
That sounds
beer too.
awesome.
Definitely.
Very cool.
Down
Well, have a
with
good night,
theology.
guys. I have to head out.
Good night.
Yeah.
All
Good night,
right.
everybody.
Good night to our East Coasters.
But
Bye-bye.
I'm on the East.
Bye. Well, for the people watching, we are going to continue this for a little bit longer with all the people who are not married or pursuing some kind of monastic option that requires them to get up at 5 a.m. or live on the East Coast.
Are you telling
I
us
live
that
on
you
the-
can get laid or join the priesthood?
I know I'm telling you to move to Seattle.
Do both.
Okay.
Never.
I live on the East Coast, but I'm in East, so I have absolutely no.
You do not. All right. You do not live on the East. Well, technically, I don't either. But I live in a state that is on the East Coast. You live in.
The Eastern
Flatland.
time zone. The Eastern time zone is more accurate.
No,
Well, here's the
no.
thing: is if Anglicans are.
Oh,
this is
Flatland
why-
was kind of a Protestant book.
The math.
Because this is the thing. This is the thing. I hope I wasn't too into. Oh wait. Oh, we're not done yet. Never mind.
Yeah, you're live, Fritz.
Go back to sleep. Go back to sleep. Everything's fine.
Fritz, tell us everything you did wrong.
Tell us more
No,
about
no,
it.
let
very-
me tell him what he did wrong.
I'm sorry. It'd be a very short list.
Well,
We will be your
well,
confessional.
Fritz went on to poll one day, and then everything he's done since then has been wrong.
If the chat could tell us everything Fritz did wrong, that would be great.
Make sure you use all
Okay,
caps
back
when
to
doing-
substantive things.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm allergic to shit posting every time. I
You
just
don't want to talk about the JQ now?
Then get out of Australia.
Just
Stay away from it.
I totally missed that reference.
This is why you can't bring Fritz onto a stream.
It worked out fairly well.
Cancer in a bottle.
Pardon me.
Yeah,
Hey,
I really hate
that's
that.
a-
You know
Okay,
what?
yeah.
That's what I should do. I should do like a satire of Jim Crow's time in a bottle called Cancer in a Bottle. That would be great.
What is time in a bottle?
That's an
So-
album, isn't it?
I could put time in a bottle.
Oh,
We'll
that
get a
song.
copyright flag, so I'm gonna stop.
All I know from Jim Croce is bad Leroy Brown.
Oh, okay. I totally missed that. I was hearing Jim Crow.
Jim Crow's.
Yeah, the sound was muffled or something. That's not what I heard. But
Well, I can imagine Jim Crow
Stormfront
did
in a
affect,
bottle.
I can imagine Jim
Crow
Crow
is
did,
an actual person. He's not a political thing.
I can imagine that Jim Crow did negatively affect somebody called Leroy Brown.
It was not something that I was actually seriously considering. Anyway, I guess if we wanted to transition to a substantive topic, which I always like to have on live streams, as opposed to references,
About transubstantiation.
Collapse of the SJW community type deal.
Well, that is actually, yeah, you did say, you might have hit the nail on the head, or you might have been a bit of a savant there, Distributors, when you said very shortly before this Lacey Green thing came out that if the progressives are smart, they're going to go to the center, and then they can destroy the right.
Well, yeah,
this seems like a bit of like a remission, a tactical retreat back to be a little more sane and go, hey, we're against the radicals as well.
I mean, they've done this 4 times, so it's not exactly. This isn't exactly something that needs to be predicted.
Yeah, it's almost as if it's like.
And they use the Mott and Bailey stuff a lot too.
It's almost as if, as an ideology, liberalism has, for the past 300 years, had pulses. It's been pulsating, and each time it pulsates, it goes out a little bit further from the center.
Like a migraine.
But the problem also is that each time it pulses, it also destroys another element of safeguards we have around things that used to be quite, heavily protected in society.
It's like a quasar.
Yeah, I was thinking like one of those plastic spheres that you can expand and contract.
It's like cancer. It goes into remission sometimes, but it never stops destroying the body.
And this is the thing, is that if the fear is that the liberals, we've just now gotten liberals and progressives to finally start going against each other and separate. This could, at least maybe with people like Kraut and T, slam them back together, and you'll get the liberal progressive coalition back. I don't know.
Kraut and T has seen too much, but people like Spinosaurus kind of been waiting for something like this.
Yeah, I think you are probably right though. I think a lot of the damage has been permanent. That people like Sargon are they're not gonna buy it.
Sargon and Kraut see the problem.
Yeah, I think it is true that. Sorry.
You go, St. Clair.
One at a time, guys.
I think it is fair enough to say that there are people like Sargon and Kraut and T who will probably drift towards the conservative, the sort of center-right conservative middle. And then there are people like Spinosaurus Kin and the Honey Badgers who are still sympathetic to the left wing and will side with them inevitably.
And can I just ask, how much, obviously we know about how Sargon and Kraut and all these various classical liberal anti-SJW channels are never going to make alliance with that party again. How much does this translate into the mainstream, though? How much is the average person really pulling away from the progressive narrative, the modernist narrative, I guess I should say?
That's $50 million question, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, I would say, if I had to venture a guess, I would say not very much. So on the internet, progressivism and feminism, SJWism has been exposed pretty well and its arguments refuted. But we forget that's on the internet. In the real world, like as you've said, Distributist, the narrative doesn't work on making and refuting logical arguments. So Sargon and Kraut can refute all the feminist talking points they hear every day, they can refute them every day. That's still not going to stop them from ending up being recited in the mainstream media as if there's no debate and it's all settled and there's no other perspective on any issues like the wage gap, as an example. I still hear the way. Yeah. You go ahead. I was done with my.
I was going to say is I think that the internet it is obviously it's going to be an increasing part of people's lives. I think more and more people are just especially younger people are giving up on TV because you can just get everything on the internet. And the thing is I mean, when they went after PewDiePie, I think people underestimate how far that went because he's the biggest YouTuber. He is more or less he's part of the face of YouTube, and he's, regardless of whatever his politics are, he's clearly like he's somebody who's not gonna go along with whatever the progressive popular narrative is.
Do you think do you think that the sort of benign adolescent gaming community on YouTube, which is sort of the majority of YouTube at this point, maybe not the majority, but the plurality, they have the biggest chunk of the YouTube market. Mm-hmm. Do you think that they're generally going to be more sympathetic to the right because of the PewDiePie incident?
Well, it depends. I mean, I think like people, at the very least, they're probably gonna be more resistant to the most extreme people. Like, but I mean, Bookie298A is not going to do it. He's as blue-pilled as you can get.
I don't think most of them are ever going to forget Gamergate. That was just such a cultural milestone. But they're just going to.
I don't know. I mean, people's memories are really short. We're already having to sort of explain Gamergate to people who weren't really paying attention.
I didn't even know what Gamergate was until the end of 2016.
I only knew what it was when it was going on.
I feel like Gamergate is just going to be like Woodstock. It happened, it was significant, but people moved on afterwards.
Sort of like Milo.
It did a lot to get Trump elected, though.
Can I ask you something, guys? Say I was a moderate Democrat, like the people I know a lot of. Explain to me Gamergate. And I've already been fed this whole thing about the feminists being harassed online. Like, explain Gamergate to me that instantly sells it to me as something that I should care about.
Okay.
They can't. They can't.
Oh, I have a good.
Sum it up in one sentence. Just one sentence.
Okay, so who is going to
one at a time, guys?
Let me just get the sentence out. Ethics matter in all industries, including video games. That's how I would sum up the position behind Gamergate.
Harassed women.
I think this may be a key point. Coerced prostitution of women in the gaming industry.
Well, that started things, but that wasn't actually the most significant thing. I really think the most significant thing about Gamergate was the Game Journal Pros list.
I think you may be correct, but I also know we need to talk about selling points here, and
I mean, the entire video game media declaring war on the readership, essentially.
Suck it and don't say anything about it. I think that's a good thing to bring out into the mainstream.
Although, but here's the problem: the stereotype of gamers, though, would still be the fat young adult white male that's in their mother's basement. People can say gamers are dead. People go, good.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of kids. They're never going to go away.
So, can I speak on this for a second?
Sure, Justin, you go.
Maybe I should start moderating now that we have 8 people.
Right. So I may or may not have spent time, paying my bills as a professional moderator for a video game manufacturer who may have massively affected the industry. If I can leave some hints, it's been a dragon's age since they've been involved in these kind of things. But in my experience on that website, the things about Gamergate that really hit people were not the games journalism so much as the social justice injected into their games. That was really the thing that drove, I think, in large part the cultural zeitgeist that kind of coalesced people around that movement. I think that while there was a scandal inside games journalism on whether or not it was objective, I think the lasting cultural impact will be the realization that social justice was really affecting something that people who didn't care anything about politics loved, and that's really, and it was destroying it, and that's really what that's going to be its legacy, is realizing that social justice ended up infecting the industry. And you see that in so many places. You see that in things like Marvel Comics, where they're now realizing that that approach is a failure.
Floretta. No one likes Floretta.
Well,
can I go back to distribute this original question, though? I mean, Justin, do you have more? Because I didn't want to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I just distribute this. You asked, if we had a feminist say in this chat and who they wanted us to sell them on Gamergate. I guess I would ask it. What?
Just a moderate Democrat who heard about it from like Law and Order or something like that.
Well,
Gamergate was on Law and Order.
Ben, I need to ask Distributus this question. When the let's not even say Christians, people like Jack Thompson were trying to get video games regulated for a right-wing cause. How do you think the case was made to a moderate conservative why Jack Thompson was wrong?
I don't think it really was. I think that conservatives understood that people like Jack Thompson were a liability for them.
Okay,
I think that there wasn't a narrative like when people became liberal. It wasn't like remember Jack Thompson or progressive. They were like remember Jack Thompson. That's why you should be progressive. I mean, people had short memories. I think no one remembered Jack Thompson after 2005.
I don't even know who Jack Thompson is.
No, there's a lot of gamers who they don't remember Jack Thompson specifically, but they remember the anti-video game sort of crusade of the 90s.
Yeah. How about I make this even more
2000s.
broader? How would you explain? How do you think the left made the case to moderate conservatives about, let's just say, I don't know, general Christian? No, I'm sticking more. I mean, yes, that is a cultural issue, but I'm trying to leave politics out for a second and focus just on culture. Gamergate was primarily a cultural issue rather than a political issue. Politics might have been involved, but it was primarily about changing art, and which is a cultural facet. So when it was generally viewed that the right wing and Christianity was hostile to, let's say, various forms of artwork that strayed away from certain from social conservative mores. How do you think the left made the case to moderate conservatives on that side?
Largely by making conservatives be the villains in a series of television and movies.
I mean, they were already.
It was not communicated via an argument. It was
so what you're saying is we need social justice villains in TV and movies.
That is what we communicated.
The thing is, we need to be making TV and movies. We are not, because we do not control Hollywood.
That was
the question. We don't need to.
How? The question was, Anarcho asked me how. And how they did it was through the narrative use of fiction. It was not accomplished through reading essays about what happened or even through conversations post hoc.
And I guess that's how we'll have to convince these sort of hypothetical moderate Democrat by making our own art where we try to paint SJW ideology in a very scandalous, very cynical light. I think is the word I'm looking for.
The thing is, I think we can kind of draw the threads of this conversation together a little bit. To draw a reference back to things like, I'm echoing again. Who's echoing?
Sorry, that's me. I'm going to try to keep myself.
Okay, I think that's better. So I'm going to try to draw the threads together a little bit, and I think this whole remission thing. When feminism is in remission, it's very difficult to attack, because who are you going to attack? A bunch of college feminists? I mean, it sounds like you're doing something petty. But that's why I think some things like Bill Nye, and these other demonstrations of feminism in the mainstream are so much more significant. Because they can't possibly recede back from that. They're too mainstream. They're pushing stuff on prime time. I mean, you can't possibly say, how can you? When's the last time you saw a conservative person tell you, homosexuality is wrong on television?
Well, I think a very not so intelligent person tried to make that event as significant as possible, like specifically designed that event. my sex junk event as specifically designed it to be as significant as possible, and wanted it to be a really important statement about left-wing philosophy and left-wing ideology. And I think it was just pulled off in a very well, I hate to be so blunt, but a very stupid way.
No, it was incredibly tactically stupid. And I think that the sex junk is an amazing benefit to any traditionalist movement, because it exposes so much and shields the right from so much criticism. The question is, are artifacts and are attitudes that you see on display in things like sex junk, is that going to make it very, very difficult for the left to do a tactical retreat? Which is what they need to do right now, right? They need to do a tactical retreat. If they can do a tactical retreat, they are in a great position. If they can't, they're not in such a great position.
My sex junk is not significant enough for that to be difficult.
Not in individuality, not in its singularity. I'm talking about in
things like
that.
Well, if they've been defending Black Lives Matter with all their political violence, and if you're going to do that,
and Islam,
and Islam, how do you walk back from either of those things?
You don't need to, because you just have to wait till the Muslims take over. I mean, this is the thing. Is like after 2 years, or a year and a half of constant terrorist attacks, week after week, month after month, the French still elected Macron. He said, "Yeah, we're just going to live with it."
I don't know. They're still terrified of nationalism. Yeah. I mean, they were really scared.
I mean, and that is the thing. Is like, it's not because Le Pen wasn't popular, because she still got like a third of the vote,
like 35%.
Yeah, and it's just that everyone else didn't like her, and so they ganged up on her. But
I think the European situation is fundamentally different. I think that because of their history, they have a far more repugnant view of nationalism than a place like America does. I think that in America, the left has overplayed its hand.
We are also talking about two different things. One is a political swing towards nationalism. The other one is a cultural dominance of progressivism, which further makes the issue we're discussing very difficult. There's so many differences between who controls the narrative in America and what political parties are palatable to Frenchmen.
I mean, I think that's true. But I would say this is I think if we could go back to the topic, then I think this is a good question to ask, is if we are seeing what appears to be the progressives and feminists doing a tactical retreat, what's the best way to go about responding to it?
Focusing on the family. I mean, I know with myself and many others, like just seeing the consequences of broken families on society has made me appreciate like cultural conservatism.
How do we make the sell?
I mean, like, how specific of an answer do you want there? Like, how do you make the sell? Just the broadly propaganda, like. What?
Yeah, well, I guess
We've been trying to talk about the family for decades now.
You need to appeal. You need to appeal. You need to find a way to appeal.
One at a time, guys.
Okay,
who's
I guess
talking?
let me just pose this question. Like, what are there specific? Like, I agree with you. The family structure is broken across the board, but it's clearly more broken in other parts of the country. Like, say, the Black American family is in much greater disrepair than white families, even though white families aren't even in that good.
Can I answer? Can I actually say something about this first? I have to say that I do have this is actually a story. It's like I've looked up on Twitter, and like if you actually tell like progressives this, not even white progressives this, that look, like 7 out of 10 black kids are born without out of wedlock. You know what they'll say to you? They'll say, no, those statistics are wrong. They just flat out deny that this is the reality. They don't actually think that they just deny reality.
In Twitter, perhaps.
Yeah.
This has not been my experience with progressives IRL.
Yeah,
Don't swallow that statistic.
We have to get the Platonists the political Platonists to embrace empiricism. That's what I'm hearing.
with poor
What?
white families, it has
That's
been,
way too esoteric for me.
poor white
Oh
families.
wait, I get it.
with a
Oh, I
question
get it. You're saying that the problem is they aren't accepting, statistics that are obviously true.
Yeah, it was half a joke and half an actual legitimate point.
Well, you never.
I guess what you're saying is you're trying to get the empiricists to actually accept empiricism in this
No.
instance.
No.
Okay. Well, I'm going to cut off explaining super esoteric jokes because I think Jared has something to say.
Oh,
As
yeah.
much as I'd like to go into the details of that analogy, Jared, do you have something to say?
Yeah, well, poor white families, as far as single-parent households, are where the blacks were like 40 years ago. So I think it's just as this problem gets worse and worse, and more people will notice how unsustainable modernity is, as far as social cohesion and development, and people will start to appreciate conservatism more, and the need for it to keep,
I have to say something here. This is the fundamental problem. Okay, Narco, sorry if I'm cutting you off, but I think I need to step in here. The problem you're identifying is conservatism. That word is the problem because we're not conserving anything anymore. The stuff that we're conserving, it's already dead. So the things that are needed to fix the family right now are radical. Hold on, Ben. The things that we need to fix the family and fix these things and fix Europe, and this sort of links back into Le Pen. These things are radical things that need to be fixed. And they're going to be very, very unsafe, and they're going to be very, very alien for people to accept. And the question is, at what point do people accept that something radical is needed to be done? Before they'll accept somebody like Macron or some other person who's just like, oh yeah, we'll pave it over with a Band-Aid, because the system we have right now, it's not going to change this trend. We've been saying these sort of little fix-it Band-Aid solutions for 30, 40 years, and either they're not done or they can't be done. So, that's the situation we're in. So conservatism can't be the solution. A broader radical reaction, or part of a broader radical reaction, is needed.
Well,
and can I please just hold on? I just need to respond to the last thing you said about how I guess what I'll call defeatist reactionism, where we wait for things to get really, really bad, and then eventually people will come to the conclusion that modernity itself is not tenable, and then they'll yearn for a more traditional solution. That's just not how I've seen things play out in reality. I've seen the exact opposite, where if people aren't getting exactly what they want from modernity, a modernist will come by and tell you, no, the problem is we're not doing enough of it. We need more technological growth, more economic growth. We just need to make sure everyone's getting an equal slice of the pie. We don't need to worry about moral character or family values, or even maintaining the family structure. We just need to give everyone free stuff, and eventually we'll all get along. And so I've seen we have to actually make things better in order to make things better. We can't just wait for things to get worse in order for them to get better, because that's not how it works.
Well, I'll say this. I say always like this. The empire could be collapsing. This could be the fall of Rome. But there's a difference in the fall of Rome if Attila the Hun just sweeps through all the continents and burns everything down, or if he's pushed back, right? The Rome still falls, but a different Europe emerges in the ashes. And consolidating a resistance in this time is, I think, the biggest priority.
Attila the Hun would be more or less Islam, right?
Well, it wasn't supposed to be that specific, France.
I think what's important is building. What you mean by resistance was more or less building up structures and institutions that will survive after the fall.
Yeah, I'm saying that understanding that a fall or some big disaster is imminent does not excuse you from. This is what Minka doesn't understand, right? Understanding that some
or libertarians
radical jolt needs to be introduced to society doesn't mean that you sit around twiddling your thumbs until that jolt is introduced. You fight the battle with an understanding that what you're building is going to be essentially a citadel against whatever wave hits society.
I have a beef with one of Anarcho's points.
Sure, go for it.
He said things don't have to get worse before they get better, and I think I have to like pretty much entirely disagree with that, because I can look at, my life, or I can look at, Jesus and like the cross and then resurrection, or like anything in history, and I see that to get to a better point, it requires like some like massively destructive, chosen sacrifice. Maybe I'm misunderstanding his point, but
I think a little. I think just a little, because I feel I agree with you that yes, I think struggle. I think I would say material struggle does yield spiritual character. It's, I guess, to quote Nietzsche of all people, "What doesn't kill you make you stronger." But I don't mean it in the way he meant it. But moving on, the problem is, I feel like you're confusing. When I say things are getting worse, you wouldn't actually think it was getting worse by the way I'm describing this. Is what I'm saying is that people are going to become so lazy. In other words, they're not going to actually, because this is why I feel that traditionalism is losing ground. Traditionalism actually requires character. It's not the type of, the ideas don't really are not meant to appeal to those who just want the easiest, most comfortable life. Those who just think if we were all had enough material resources, we'd be happy.
That's
When
why
I'm talking about things,
I was gonna say, that's
let me
why I
just
think
quickly
Brave New
finish this
World
point.
is such a conservative book.
Right. Well, let me just quickly finish this point.
Yeah,
when I
you
talk about
can wait
things,
for people to finish their points before you point out things that are wrong or right with it.
So just to make this brief, because things are getting worse, and when I say things are getting worse, I mean we are relying so much on economic and technological growth to solve our problems that we think it's making us better because it's making things easier and it's making us more comfortable, but we're not. It's actually denying us the ability to develop, to actually build spiritual character, as you were saying. So I think we're in agreement with each other, but we're using different words to describe.
Is what you're saying essentially that we can't become lazier so that we can become less lazy in the future?
Exactly.
Okay,
And
that
you can't
makes
become
more
more
sense.
physically or mentally. We're getting, as each generation becomes less capable of dealing with hard truths. I believe, when we think of the greatest generation, we call them that because they had to endure the Great Depression and the bloodiest war in all of world history. That's going to cause them to really know about sacrifice and honor and duty, whereas the succeeding generations have not had that experience, and so hence what we see now.
I almost think that's partially what's going to cause why Generation Z and probably younger millennials and further generations to be super conservative. Because as I sort of pointed out earlier, is our childhoods were not the 90s prosperity and optimism. They were crisis after crisis. Seeing planes fly into buildings, thousands of people dead, massively unpopular wars and economic instability. Like eventually this is going to start breeding a more hardy generation.
It might take a while. I mean, these things only occurred on television. They didn't occur in.
They
did not occur to our generation the way these hardships occurred to my grandparents' generation.
It should be said that my generation, and Fritz's generation, the younger millennials, is, I would say, the least hard generation that humanity has ever had.
Oh, we're soft as heck.
I think I might have to we're experiencing the crises, seeing them, but I think the generations that come after us are going to be ones because the thing is, this sort of easy life we have now, it's not going to last. I don't think it's going to last for all that much longer.
I have to agree with Fritz. I think it is a mistake to think that traditionalism is actually falling. I think it is actually on the rise. Slowly, it's a slow ascent, but I think it is something that is a movement that's building. I'm just outside of the millennial generation, but most of the people I speak to who are inside the millennial generation are looking at the failures and saying, something has to change, and most of their movement has been in the direction of traditionalism.
Again, I would say it's probably more younger
Hold
millennials
on,
because
Doug.
I still
Time.
I'd say okay, sorry. I would say just a caveat on that is I think that applies more to younger millennials and Gen Z because again, I think probably the SJW generation would be people probably in that 25 to 35-year-old range. They're still extremely left wing.
Yeah, younger generation X, older millennial.
I hate my generation so much.
I think
Hold on.
I hate my generation.
I think we're kind of coming to the end of the stream. I think we'll end it in about 10 or 15 minutes just so we can make it a nice round number. I think a lot of this stuff with the generational thing. I hear people saying, "Well, traditionalism is making a comeback." Great. So the traditionalism is going to make a comeback, and that comeback can be in the form of something that's robust and that will build for the next generation, or it could be a big ratchet. And I think whatever benefit I see, whatever swing back to traditionalism I see, I want it to go into these long-term. I want to invest the money. I don't want to use that effort to get another dingbat elected into the presidency, because that's not where the problem is. The problem is much larger. The problem is not going to be solved by reform.
Back in the 90s, we had this huge opportunity to talk about all the problems in the family and stuff, and we used it to talk about why Marilyn Manson is turning kids into school shooters.
But wait, hold on. I think what wasn't said in the 90s about the family, Ben, that you felt needed to be said? Because I remember everything being said. Hold on. Before we introduce a new topic, I want to get this question answered.
We did have the Clinton boom years, which made it much easier to be a single parent, whereas our economic growth is slowing drastically, and it does not look like it's going to reach 3% or higher in the near future.
Well, I was going to say, here's one thing: divorce. I mean, even the supposedly pro-family people were still pro-divorce.
I mean, so you're saying there should have been a campaign against no-fault divorce in the 90s?
That just would have been a bigger catastrophe.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying we would have done better with that than we would have with this nonsense about Pokemon turning kids demonic.
Yeah, and like Marilyn Manson and all the benign crap that doesn't really have anything to do with the actions that people take.
I mean, in some sense, I think in the 90s, Christians needed to realize that they were a minority, and they didn't. They thought that the 90s was a return to the early 60s, and it wasn't. It was a respite before their decline occurred more earnestly, right? And now I think that we're actually in a better position because I think that a lot of the leaders are a little bit more awake right now. They understand their situation at least.
I have a question, Distributist. Are you somebody? Do you have? I'm sorry. Let me ask it a little bit differently. Do you have very little confidence in sort of Edmund Burke style conservatism?
I think, and I like Edmund Burke as a principle of governing a society running well. It's not a very good formula for a society that has a fundamental flaw and is in the process of breaking down.
So right? it's a good formula for maintenance of a stable society that has already been achieved.
And I mean, you put it precisely correctly. Yeah, I think it's different. When you're. How about this? I'll give you an analogy. Like if you're coming in like someone comes into the hospital, he has a heart attack. Like you don't start lecturing him about like good diet and like, oh well, I guess you should be like no you put the thing you give him a shock and you give him the anemic agents and you give him the emergency care he needs. You give him the jolt, and then maybe after a stable condition is met, then you can go back and talk about how he needs to get things on a more stable course. But these things have certain contexts in which the ideas are useful.
I think that's a good way of putting it.
I wanted to go back just like 2 minutes in the conversation because Justin and I think it was Justin, there wasn't the light, and Fritz were both saying, Gen Z is conservative, and what I hear in that is, hear me out, is I'm essentially hearing Calvinism. It's oh, everyone's conservative, it's going to be good. Or whoever God wants to be Christian will become Christian. It's going to be fine. I think maybe that's something that's okay to keep in the deep recesses of your mind and have no action based on that whatsoever. I'm not like, I don't want to go out into all of like 14,
not really sure what
To
14 words
saying
about
it's-
crime.
I'm not really sure
I
how you got
just
that.
reference.
I don't understand what you're saying at all. Sorry.
Yeah. I think even saying something like that encourages us to be lazy.
Saying something like
Say-
what? Can you
Like,
clarify?
dude,
Generation Z is
That
the
is
most
just going to
conservative
happen.
generation ever.
Josh, what was it?
I think saying something like Generation Z is super conservative, the most conservative generation ever. I think doing something like that is giving us a free pass to be lazy. And
Yeah.
I can't support that at all.
Generational swingbacks do not work in our favor because the problems are too radical.
Well,
They give you a brief.
demographic.
Yes,
I think-
Anarcho?
I was just going to say demographics are not in our favor on that court. Even if we could convince a substantial portion of the native population mass immigration, it's going to see to it that we can't even win the cultural battle.
That I think, that is an additional thing that makes the point ridiculous. But I think Josh's point was on a much more spiritual level. I think that the person who's counting on a generational a reaction or a generational backlash is fundamentally playing not to lose. And if you're playing not to lose, I mean, you can still lose, but you can't win, right? If you're an active cultural force, you don't rely on backlashes to do your work for you. You see that the society has a need, society has a truth that it needs to understand, and you get out there and make society understand that.
So
I think maybe we might want to frame Generation Z in sort of the way the alt-right frames Donald Trump. Because I have some alt-right friends, and they view Trump as stalling for time, essentially. It'll keep
Trump
society,
like that too.
Yeah, it'll keep society from degenerating just enough, and then once he's out, then we enact
That's
our whole
what people
plan.
were saying about Reagan in the 80s.
Yeah, and they didn't really act on it well at all.
I'm of the opinion that every president we've had since Eisenhower is differing degrees of crap.
Me too.
Well, even Eisenhower, for all the good things you can say about him, he didn't really reverse much of anything. He just kind of managed the cultural decline. I would say, like, every president since Coolidge.
Well, I think
I don't think there was any cultural decline in the 50s.
Yeah. I think the 50s was the last. This is my thought. It's like people say the greatest generation. I actually think of them as I consider them like they're the last great generation. They're like the last generation that had a semblance of what traditional values would have been like, because the whole idea of a generation becoming more and more liberal than the next, that wasn't really a thing that happened until the 20th century.
The greatest generation that's still alive.
Mm-hmm. Well, not for much longer.
We have a veteran of D-Day at our church, and he's not long for this world. And there are discussions about trying to have a special church service in which he is interviewed to help him keep his thoughts in order so he can give his testimony to the congregation before his health deteriorates any further.
I thought Mormons didn't have churches; they had temples.
That would be the Brighamite Mormons, and they still have churches. And the RLDS only have one temple in the world, and we don't even have control of it at the moment.
When I was a kid, my Catholic church that I was a part of, they would choose us. They would choose from us to work in this soup kitchen for needy families. They would come in and eat lunch. And one of the people I worked with there, and I always volunteered every week. One of the people who worked there was Larry McGee, and he was a World War II vet who had been a POW in Japan. He was a prisoner of war. And he had spent.
I know what POW stands for.
Well, he had spent years in a Japanese internment camp. and just listening to his stories were very fascinating to me. I had a story about a friend of mine who was
my great
he was a veteran. That's why I wanted to say it.
One of my great uncles, great uncles was a witness at the hydrogen bomb test. Like he said, it was like the middle of the night, and then for half a minute it was daylight.
So, guys, I think we're sort of running out of actually broadcastable topics. I know this went all over the place, but I think we broadly covered the two topics that I wanted to cover, namely personal conversion stories in the first half, and then sort of dealing with the modern world post-conversion in the second. So I think it's been a good but fairly schizophrenic stream. Does anyone have something they want to discuss for the last 5 minutes before we close it down? Or 10 minutes?
Well, I would just say, I think the biggest question we have to ask or answer would be, how do you form... No. Guys. One person at a time.
But I
think the fundamental question for us for those who consider themselves to be traditionalists would be, how do we reconcile modern technology with traditional values?
That's a very important question. Ben?
Oh, well, I was going to just bring up, how do we make traditionalism funny? That's what we have to do.
I think you can make traditionalism funny. I guess you could say that Christianity doesn't have as good a comic tradition as Judaism does.
There was one question I would ask. If there was one question I would ask everybody who I meet, it would be, would you be okay with running a society based on principles that were not true or factual if they worked?
The noble lie?
What do you mean by running a society on principles? I mean, I know that's kind of a dumb question, but I think that's
What do you mean by true?
It's like a big philosophical.
Well, when I say true, I mean when I'm talking about true, I'm talking about proven via reason and logic, and when I talk about fact, I mean proven via empiricism.
Okay, principles don't necessarily derive from logic or truth. I think you're talking about the noble lie. Should we lie to people if it causes them to act rightly? I think that it's the old saying, utopia built on a foundation of lies is still a utopia of lies. If you have to violate goodness in order to achieve goodness, you might as well stop right there. You can't fulfill a logical contradiction as far as I'm concerned.
I don't think you can really have principles based on empiricism. They have to be based on personal experience and such.
I guess I might answer it. I'd have to be the context, I guess.
I think noble lies are inherently like edge cases. I think if you build your society on a lie, I would say, you could say it's divine intervention. You could say it's just natural law of the universe, but it will collapse. And anything else is you just trying to steal time from the future, and the future will kill you for it.
So I think that running a society anyway, it will eventually lead to collapse. It's all about how long it lasts. It's how you judge success. Just success in this case would be relative.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, to give you an example that I've been thinking about a lot, like race realism is something that could possibly be true. I don't know if it's true or not. But in many ways, any working liberal society, regardless of how many people of different races it has, if it has any diversity whatsoever, it has to pretend like race realism is false.
Yes, I agree.
If race realism is true, I don't think there's anything egregiously wrong with not bringing it up in polite society. I mean, you'd have to make diverse society run.
Well, can I interrupt for just a sec? I don't think you need to deny race realism in order to still have liberal societies. What is it like? Let's say
you would
tomorrow. Let's say everyone agreed that race realism is true and that there are certain genetic tendencies. Wait, hold on,
Ben, we have to let the person. Before the objection comes, I have to know what Anarcho is saying. So, Anarcho, can you complete the thought?
Assume that there were certain genetic traits that clustered around certain groups of people based on race. that doesn't mean that our legal system, which is our liberal legal system premised on judging each individual as an individual and not letting certain characteristics native to their group determine this. That's how we base our entire legal and political system on. That's how it's supposed to be. So I don't even see how race realism is even an issue. We can say, okay, race realism is true, and nothing about our liberal legal and political system is going to change because of that truth.
Okay,
that's awesome.
Ben, did you have a response?
Yes, I really don't. I really think it's extremely presumptuous, this term race realism, that it's being used for more than the idea that races are real. It's being used for all of this stuff that goes way beyond what the actual term says. And I don't think we should give the alt-right people that.
Well, I don't want to go into a discussion about how we should change our language. People know what I was referring to.
So
for the purposes of a 10-minute conversation, we can continue, right?
So in response to my conversation, you distributors would say yes, probably.
I mean, it depends. I believe as a ruler, it depends entirely on the specific actions, right? Like, not talking about it is ethical. Discouraging people from talking about it is ethical. Actually trying to cover things up and destroy truth and squash people who bring it up against, that's unethical. So again, the ethics pertain to the specific action taken. And I believe, should I summarize, it's sort of a just war theory, basically, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know if such a thing can exist, where everyone accepts something as true but doesn't act on it. And if that would, basically make us all a bunch of LARPers. I mean that like literally, like it would be a bunch of, terrible people LARPing as if, we have good ideals that we're holding to.
Well, I am a bit of a sophist, so that is kind of my worldview, is that's what people essentially are.
Okay.
Well, why isn't there like the middle ground where you acknowledge that there are hard truths that not everyone could accept, but you don't suppress it for the people who are seeking the truth? Or
that's a difference,
I guess, right?
That's a difference between St. Clair's original framing, where everyone accepts something as true, as opposed to you suggest that some people, aren't.
No, I mean, would you allow? My question was, would you allow a society that accepts something false as true if that thing worked? That's what that was the idea behind my question.
Well, I mean, that's a very interesting question, but I do agree that we are at time right now. So perhaps we can bring this up in a different live stream. I'm going to end the broadcast, and maybe we can discuss it in private chat. Or does that sound good, guys? I think it was a pretty good stream. So
yeah,
I guess I'll thank
it was pretty good.
Yeah, I think I'll thank all of our guests, and we'll see you guys on a future live stream. Hopefully, have a great night.
Bye.